Let me welcome two new members of the council here for their very first meeting. David Apney, CEO of UPS. David, where are you? I saw you earlier. Here he is, right here. David, welcome. And Joe Echeverria, the former CEO of Deloitte. Where's Joe? I saw him earlier. There we go. Joe, welcome. Thank you both for your service. It's great to have you here. Also would like to welcome Senator Klobuchar. Where is she? There she is. Welcome back. And Senator Gillibrand, I know has she made it yet? Okay, she'll be, knowing her, she's not going to miss the meeting. Congressman Reichert, where is, not Congressman from Washington? Mayor Frank County of Des Moines, is the mayor here? Great to have you with us. He represents not only himself in Des Moines, but U.S. Conference of Mayors. So thank you for representing a very important constituency for some of the things we get done, particularly the trade agenda when we get on to that later today. We look forward to your participation today. Look, since we last met in June, just a very quick tee-up. This group has continued to work in a lot of different arenas. In October, led by our Vice Chairman Ursula Burns of Xerox, who all of you know, 8 members of the council, I think most of whom are here today, and joined by Secretary Pritzker, went to Warsaw, traveled on a fact-finding trip to not only there, but Turkey. The delegation met with government and private sector stakeholders, looking for new ways to deepen ties with these two very strategic partners and allies. The members who participated have prepared a significant report, and we look forward to hearing from them on that. Council members also undertook, and this is the second item of business other than just hearing from our leadership, undertook an important midterm review and prioritization of recommendations that we've compiled in a report for discussion today, basically looking back over the last 2 years. What does that mean for priorities over the next 2? Where can we add maximum value for the President and his cabinet? I think this exercise has been very fruitful. I think you'll agree with me at the end. I hope you will at the end of the meeting today. And I look forward to this morning's discussion with our executive branch partners on how we can best execute against this modified blueprint, which is all about redoubling our efforts as a council to help strengthen our economy. Before digging into those reports, we'll hear from Secretary Pritzker on the progress of the NEI, National Export Initiative, and the upcoming meeting of the U.S.-China Joint Committee on Commerce and Trade, JCCT, that Secretary Pritzker is taking a very personal and strong initiative with. By the way, that first JJCT meeting will be held for the first time outside of Washington, in Chicago of all places, a city quite familiar to Secretary Pritzker and some others in the room, including myself. At the end of the session, we will have an opportunity to hear from Ambassador Froman, who I know is here. There he is, Mike, and then the President on the trade agenda. So we'll sort of pull that all together in the back end of the meeting when the President comes. So we've got a very full agenda today with a lot of issues, substantive issues to discuss. I'd like to recognize our Vice Chairman, our world traveler, Ursula Burns, for a few opening remarks.
Very short, just to say we have a lot to cover today, particularly with the feedback on the trip that we took, and I'll defer any other comments to that portion of the discussion, my colleagues.
Great, Ursula. Thank you very much. And Valerie Jarrett, Senior Advisor to the President, is with us. Valerie, do you have any comments?
I do. Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. I want to begin by saying thank you, Jim, for your leadership. Over the many years that you have now chaired the Export Council, and I know you couldn't do it without Ursula Burns as your vice chair, so your leadership has been tremendous. And I say to the new members who are here today that this public-private partnership is instrumental to the President in shaping his policy for how we can grow our economy. And as you all know, exports and trade are a critical part of that agenda. And I think the track record that we have over the last 6 years of getting very important feedback, constructive suggestions, and partnership as we try to take our message out to the general public from this council has been second to none. And so we really appreciate everything, both from within the administration, all of those who sit around the table, as well as those of you from the private sector who join us on this effort. You'll hear a lot more from the president, and I think timing right now of this meeting is critical. As you know, Jim and Ursula, he had the chance to address the BRT last week, and Mike has had how many meetings? On 1,500 meetings. But all of that hard effort is now really going to be turning into action that's going to start in the new year. So we're delighted to have everybody here. I thank those of you who have served, and we really welcome those of you who are joining. I think you're going to find this is time well spent, and everyone around this table is busy, and the fact that you come and you participate, I think, is an indication of how seriously you take it, but also, I hope, an indication of how important your advice and counsel is to the president. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
One more thing, Jim.
Yes.
Unlike in the past time, our microphones do not have to be activated. So that's the good news. The bad news is they're on all the time. So don't think you're whispering to your colleagues and not being picked up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you for that warning.
I appreciate those comments very much. And candidly, we couldn't be as effective without the coordination and help we get from you and the administration and allowing our voices to be heard. I'm looking at Jeff over here, thinking of all the jobs that were added, high-paying manufacturing and services types jobs. It's a fortuitous time.
It is.
Do you have any comments?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, we have had a good run of job creation. We still have work ahead of us, particularly on the wages front. And I think you're right, Jim, if you unpack the most recent report, you see some better news on wage growth and the mix of high-paying jobs where the jobs are being created. If you look at exports and how they've contributed to growth across the last several years, they've really grown faster than the overall economy, so have done more than their share, and we need to continue that. And I think recently we've seen some softening related to the global economy softening, and that means that as a public-private partnership, we really need to take your recommendations as we have been doing and execute. In many ways, this is much like the businesses you've run. The strategies are important, and the execution is really what, at the end of the day, creates success. So you've been very generous in your recommendations. They've been spot on, whether they're in travel and tourism and how we can continue to grow the #1 services export, or in getting products shipped more easily overseas with the international trade data system, which is an important piece of relatively complex work, but that we're all over and are going to continue to execute on and implement on. So we need more recommendations. You need to help us with the implementation, hold us accountable for the implementation, so that we can continue to grow exports. I do look forward to the conversation that the President and Mike are going to lead on the importance of these trade agreements and getting those done. And I think your help on that will also be invaluable, helping to explain the benefits to American workers in terms of jobs and well-paying jobs. So thank you for all your work. As Valerie said, we have the privilege of working with several councils across government, and there are many, many best practices that the Export Council has created that we are implementing elsewhere. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate that. Listen, I was reminded. I think is Caroline here? Was she? Yeah, she was here. Caroline was another one of the president's advisors is with us today, and she helped lead a discussion this morning on Russian, Ukraine sanction-related activities, and as you know, both you and Jeff are in view here, just the way you've gone through that with the business community, and I made this remark this morning with the Vice President, gone through this difficult time with the business community in a way to maximize impact there. Working with us constructively has been a best practice in itself in terms of getting through some tough times. So I just want to recognize Carolyn while I see her. Listen, I understand that Senator Klobuchar, there's a little stuff going on today. And I know you've got a tight timing. would you like to make some comments before Penny?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for their work. We have seen the benefits of exports in our state. We're now down to 3.9% unemployment, and the metro area of Minneapolis-St. Paul has the lowest unemployment rate of any metro area in the country. So that is just one example of what exports have done. We are working, as you know, on the most ill-fated named Cromnibus, which for those of you who are not inside the Beltway, it's CR for the continuing resolution combined with the word omnibus. And I think people were a little surprised at some of the things in it. That's a nice way of putting it. And we'll see, if there's going to be further negotiations on what's going to happen with that, especially on the Senate side. I don't know. The good news is we got the Travel Promotion Act in there that Senator Blunt and I have worked so hard on in the Senate, and that's really important for exports. As you know, it's added 1 million people. Those studies have shown. This guy is going to chair the board, I hope, of Brand USA. And $3.4 billion just last year, the additional 1 million international visitors spent. We also have the manufacturing piece that's included in the omnibus. And so there's some really good things, but there's also some problematic things. So we're hoping we can work something out. The second thing we're getting done is the tax extenders. Many of us would have preferred, as I'm sure you would have, that it would have been for a longer period of time. But those are going into place, I hope, by the end of the year. And then the next thing I would just finish up with is the hope that we can move forward next year and get a lot of things done, especially things near and dear to the heart of people in this room. I know there's going to be work on the trade agreements. Infrastructure, I'm very hopeful on, as there is some bipartisan support for that. There's the possibility of tying it into some kind of international tax reform, which would be a great idea, as we've seen these inversions and other problems occur. And then I would love to see something with the training for kids in high school with the state. So many of our states starting to see these lower unemployment rates because of the good work that so many people have done. We have a lot of kids that aren't graduating, and yet we're starting to have many, many openings in the manufacturing field and welding and things like that. So this idea of really shifting how we handle some of the high school training and doing more with these 1- and 2-year degrees, I think would be a really smart idea. So that's the report from the Hill, and we'll see what happens by the end of the night. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for your participation in this council, which is consistent and important. And good luck today. Good luck today. Listen, the Secretary is here now. Secretary Pritzker, update on the NEI.
Sure. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Ursula, and thank you, members of the President's Export Council, for all the good work that you do and for being present today. As I've said before, this group is an essential piece of the administration's vision of commercial diplomacy. Let me first talk about our PEC trip. Many of you joined me on the economic fact-finding mission to Poland and Turkey earlier this year. This trip was about putting our business leaders on the field to help advance our strategic and economic interests. And we joined together to deliver a message to the Polish and Turkish leaders about the need for reform, to create a level playing field for businesses, to open their doors to more American exports, and in the process to a more robust commercial relationship and a far more effective one as well with the United States. That message is far more powerful, coming not just from me or those of us on the economic team or from any particular government official, but from all of us together. When we're working together, the message is heard much more strongly. And this trip was an opportunity to showcase your ability to work with the government to promote reform and create new opportunities for our businesses around the world. And I look forward to continuing that kind of work together in the balance of our term. As we begin today's meeting, I want to briefly update you on the new phase of the National Export Initiative, or what we call NEI Next. Early in this administration, President Obama created the NEI, or the National Export Initiative, to spur economic growth and job creation. Through this effort, for the very first time, we brought the full suite of federal resources to bear to help U.S. businesses drive exports. And as Jim mentioned, the NEI has produced remarkable results. We're on track for the 5th straight record-breaking year of exports. According to the latest trade data released last week, U.S. exports of goods and services increased by more than $2 billion just month over month. So we really have a great momentum going. This kind of continued export growth benefits our economy at a macro level, but it also improves the lives and livelihoods of individuals across the country. And indeed, every morning, over 11.3 million Americans go to work in jobs that are supported by exports. Let me put a finer point on this. Whenever we open new markets to American products and services, your companies grow, and our nation's workers and families are better off. So earlier this year, we introduced NEI Next to build on the progress that we've made to date. NEI Next was heavily shaped by PEC recommendations and feedback from thousands of customers and partners. It will fundamentally change the way the U.S. government helps American companies expand their exports and their global footprint. NEI Next is our blueprint to help ensure that more American businesses of all sizes can start sending their goods and services beyond our borders and fully capitalize on markets opening up across the globe. The agencies here today around this table have made an ambitious set of NEI Next commitments. They include providing customized and focused assistance for businesses, including those in emerging industries, streamlining export-related services and reporting requirements and processes, working to expand access to financing, partnering with states and communities to foster local trade and investment business support networks, and carrying out our trade agenda by ensuring access to foreign markets and facilitating a level playing field abroad. The recommendations that you have provided over the past 4 years have guided this work. To highlight a few examples, the PEC has prioritized improvement of data. And under NEI Next, we'll supply American businesses with the information they need to make export decisions by making data and market research more shareable and more open, and working with partners to expand its distribution. Second, the PEC has reiterated the need for federal integration with state and regional export initiatives. So under NEI Next, we will make it easier for small businesses to access export-related assistance by increasing our coordination with local trade and investment resources. And more importantly, we'll guide program improvements to better meet the export-related needs of small and medium-sized companies, which the PEC has made a priority from day one. Yep. We're laser-focused on broadening the base of exporters and expanding U.S. export activity. Central to meeting that mission and the goals of NEI Next is a series of steps to strengthen our hand in markets around the world. So working with Congress and the U.S. Trade Representative and you and other business leaders, our practical and immediate tasks are clear. First, we must reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. It is a critical tool that better enables U.S. companies of all sizes to compete overseas. We also must work with Congress to pass trade promotion authority to empower the President to move forward on high-standard, broad-based regional agreements like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And we must drive home the message of how these steps will expand exports, grow our economy, and create jobs. So on each of these components of our agenda, we need your help. We need to make the case that trade agreements can offer enormous benefits, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises looking to tap into new markets. Together with your efforts, we can help ensure that tremendous benefits of international trade are more widely felt and understood. Of course, I can't talk about trade and exports without mentioning one of our country's greatest exports, which is entrepreneurship. I recently traveled with the Vice President to Morocco for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. The summit made this fact clear. The United States and the Department of Commerce has a unique role to play in ensuring all entrepreneurs have access to the support structure necessary to help them thrive. We have a responsibility to share our expertise and our experience and to show our partners worldwide what it takes to build an entrepreneurial society in their own communities. One way we made this meet this charge is through the public-private partnership called the President's Ambassadors for Global Entrepreneurship, or PAGE, which I'm honored to chair. This is a presidential initiative that brings together 11 of America's top entrepreneurs who use their stories and knowledge to mentor and inspire young people and startups across the country and around the world. 3 PAGE members accompanied the Vice President and me to Morocco, and I'm pleased to tell you that we'll soon expand the PAGE program to include more members because there's so much demand for them. Along with PAGE, the PEC's recommendations to improve the business environment for entrepreneurs and innovators have provided us with ideas to help people turn their inventions into thriving businesses. And I thank you for your continued focus on this topic, which contributes to the well-being of so many Americans and to the overall competitiveness of the United States as a whole. And finally, next week I'm heading to Chicago with Ambassador Froman to host the 25th U.S.-China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade. Secretary Vilsack will also join us for those meetings. The JCCT provides a framework for the U.S. and Chinese governments to discuss policy issues in the bilateral commercial relationship. This year's program has been reimagined with a greater emphasis on commerce to facilitate increased participation by U.S. and Chinese businesses and a greater interaction between our government and our businesses. So for the first time, private sector leaders and government officials together will assemble around themes that are central to the U.S.-China commercial relationship, including investment, travel and tourism, economic leadership, and excess capacity. So I want to close by saying this. The President's Export Council plays an invaluable role in guiding our country's economic policy. This meeting is our chance to hear from you about the issues that are top of mind for you, and I really am very grateful for all the help and recommendations that you've given us in helping us set our agenda. So thank you very much, and Jim, I really appreciate the opportunity.
I mean, you just have to listen to the Secretary to feel the energy behind a very comprehensive agenda. I mean, my congratulations to you and your team. This PAGE initiative is terrific. I mean, it's the best of America. It's the best of what we do and our values. I love it. And you've re-engaged us on supporting Ambassador Froman, and we'll talk more about that later. And JCCT, we need somebody to step in and lead that relationship, and I'm really, really glad to see you just jumping in there. I look forward to participating in Chicago next week.
Thank you,
So,
Jim.
I think we've alluded to this PEC trip that Ursula led, and I think we're going to get a little more comprehensive view of it from Ursula. So over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Secretary Pritzker. It's really good to have you at the helm here. It's been helpful and energizing, I think, for all of us. There are 5 points that I want to make about the PEC trip, and after I make those 5 points, I'll open it up to some of my colleagues who traveled with me. First, I want to actually call the names of the people who actually did this trip. This was what I would call heavy lifting. Getting on a plane and traveling to Poland and Turkey sounds like a lot of fun, and it was actually, but it's a lot of time. Arnie Sorensen from Marriott, Marilyn Houston from Lockheed Martin, David Abney from UPS, Robert Wolf from 32 Advisors. Bob is here. Who is he? He's over here. Mary Andringa from Vermeer, Pat Warrett from ADM, and Dick Friedman, who's not here, from Carpenter and Company. Were there for the vast majority. All of us were there for the vast majority of the trip. Some people had to step out for certain pieces. The first point is that I believe the trip was a success from any perspective that, and any perspective that you can view it in any measure. I don't think that we actually really understood the fortuitousness of the timing and the countries that we went to. It turns out both Poland and Turkey had experienced some very important turning points in August with the election of Poland's Prime Minister Tusk as the President of the European Council, and the election of the Prime Minister Erdogan as the President of Turkey. Both happened right before or as we were entering these companies. Separately, intervening geopolitical and security tensions in the Ukraine and in the Middle East heightened the strategic importance of the U.S.'s relationship with both Poland and Turkey. On the economic side, our commercial relationship, I think, took center stage as a positive engagement that we could have with these two countries. Because they know, and we know, that increased trade and investment serve not only to promote U.S. economic interests, but also to serve to advance U.S. security interests by promoting regional prosperity and stability. The second point was our meeting offered us the opportunity to showcase this idea that we call the PEC, which is fairly unique around the world. And it was something that garnered quite a bit of conversation by both the private sector members, the businesses that we saw in both Poland and Turkey, but also at the government level. A lot of curiosity about how it worked and if it worked, and we actually speak to the president and we make recommendations and we don't always agree. It was an actually very interesting discussion, and I think that both countries, and business leaders and government leaders in both countries, took away this idea that maybe they should do something similar in their countries to have this public-private partnership work. As a byproduct of that as well, we happen to have quite a few women around the table. Pat, myself, Secretary Pritzker, Marilyn, Mary, and it was quite startling when we walked into these meetings, generally with a room full of men of all sorts, except for the servers or support staff. And we're sitting around the table as the leaders of the conversation. So it was not intentional, but it was a very positive, I think, very positive byproduct of some of the commercial diplomacy and the progress that we could make. The third point was that there are clearly challenges that we could see on the ground and feel and discuss in doing business in both Poland and Turkey. Transparency, rule of law, just normal infrastructure about how we actually engage with government. I think that we were able to actually have a direct conversation with both government leaders and the business leaders about the things that we needed as businesses to actually increase investments in their country and vice versa, for them to actually come here and increase investments in ours. Fourth, it was clearly evident that there are really opportunities to increase trade in both of these countries. Poland, surprisingly, a very open economy, very well educated, good infrastructure, and a desirous and positive relationship where we should be able to push further, particularly with small and mid-sized businesses, to actually expand our reach in those places. And in Turkey, for sure. I mean, this growing population, strategic relevance from a location standpoint, a resource standpoint, and we have to redouble our efforts to make sure we can engage in these countries in a positive way. And it's not as scary as it seems when you're far away. When you're there, you see real people, real roads. We know this, but going actually helps to remind us of that. And then finally, a consideration of the challenges and the opportunities informed the PEC's development of the agenda to strengthen, actions that Penny spoke about a little bit earlier, to strengthen our relationships, particularly from a business perspective, in both Turkey and in Poland. The full agenda is described in the PEC report. I want to thank people who participated in developing the report. I think it's actually excellently done and an easy read, not overly long, and bulleted in such a way that we can actually take action. I also want to highlight just some of my key members, and they can actually take some points as well, and then I'll close. How about that? I'll start with Arnie, who actually, in addition to traveling with us, gave us a place to sleep a couple of nights. It was very helpful, thank you. And we were treated extremely well.
No better than you deserve. Just a couple of comments, great reporters. First, let's talk about diversity. The Vice President talked this morning about promise as being the word that he used to describe the United States. Really no prouder aspect of this trip than to see our women leaders, all of whom were true leaders. There was no tokenism about this. In fact, the men were very much second fiddle sitting at the table. And it was fabulous to see, particularly in Turkey, which is in a totally different place culturally, to sort of be confronted with, this is the scene of the United States. This is a scene of promise and opportunity, which was the best possible face we could put on it. And I thought that was maybe the most striking thing about the trip. Secondly, just a comment about tone on the two different places. Poland is They view themselves as our greatest ally, with reason. They are friends of ours. They want to be close to us. It was surprising how many of them said, why don't we have visa waiver, for example, if we're such good friends? Why do you force your government people to fly only on U.S. carriers when we've got a Polish carrier that they can fly on? And they were very much wanting to be as close to us as they possibly could. And I think in many respects, the more we can do that, the better for the business relationships as well as the government relations. Turkey is a totally different environment. Turkey was wary of us. The Turkish business people, I think, were somewhat wary of Turkey. And so in the informal conversations, it was a little quieter, a little bit, not conspiratorial in the sense that people were trying to do something wrong, but how do you help us? And where are we going together? And the tone of each of these meetings, I think, changed a little bit from meeting to meeting, depending on the official that we live with. But we met with enormously more complicated than Poland. Bigger market, greater opportunity, I think in some respects, but a harder place to see that we ultimately get to the kind of growth that I think is easier in Poland in some respects.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Pat, I wanted to start with you. You did a great job in opening, so Pat, from ADM.
Very good. I just wanted to also say how much I appreciated joining. I think just a couple of points on the Poland piece to build on Arnie's point. A very good friend of the country, country to country and business to business relationships, I think can be even stronger. And I would support initiatives to regularly have that kind of dialogue. We talked about a couple of opportunities to do that with the business community and with the government. I also remember when we talked about where to travel. We've talked about this 2 years ago, and Secretary, you were very open to listening to, different places. I think we made some very good choices, and I appreciated the opportunity, and I hope we can do another trip, perhaps later in 2015 or 2016, which I think would also be good for the PEC to continue this commercial diplomacy.
Jim can lead that.
He has a plane.
He has a couple.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Marilyn?
Yes, I'd just say that something that was really obvious to me for both Poland and Turkey is how important we are as a partner to them in their defense and security needs. And that spills over certainly into commercial relationships. And so to the extent that we could talk about how we are supporting them and a lot of the challenges that they face in their regions, and be able to talk about how what we do there then opens up trade with their industry, local industry, and then certainly brings job growth to the U.S. and economic growth to the U.S. And I think that helped set the tone in a lot of cases where it might have been, as Arnie said, a little more tense. It had opened up and said, we are here, we are working closely with you on a lot of things in your defense and security needs. That says we're a great partner, a great commercial partner for you as well.
Mary, SMB, she was our SMB voice in the PAC.
Yeah, thank you. Great comments already by all my colleagues, and I just want to say that I think we were all just so thankful for the phenomenal work of the Commerce staff, for every detail and the changes that had to happen in the schedule and keeping us up to speed. And also, Secretary Pritzker was just phenomenal in leading many discussions, and I just did a phenomenal job of that. And yes, to Ursula's point, actually small and medium-sized enterprises was brought up a lot. The SME was brought up a lot, both in Poland and Turkey. And what was interesting, both Poland and Turkey are very much wanting to grow their entrepreneurs. They're wanting to have more jobs. In Poland, I was sort of amazed by the fact that their unemployment for youth in the rural areas was like 28%. And so manufacturing was also very important to them, and they were, also wanting to know how to export. But they also really asked in both places, both government officials and really the local business folks, how can we have more help on how to get the small and medium-sized businesses growing and reaching out? And really, they have the same issues we've discovered in all of our SME forums around the country. How do you get access to financing? How do you get access to information how to export more? How do you get access to customers and to distribution channels? And so all those things were very similar. And I think we left saying, yes, let's see how we can work together. Actually, the Small Business Association group can help, as well as the PAC. And then finally, also in Turkey, I was approached by quite a few people after speaking about SMEs, about how should that topic be part of the B20 in Turkey, since they're hosting it next year. So I think a lot of we were able to coordinate and to talk about and recognize the importance of the small and medium-sized enterprises, which have the opportunity to grow and to help their countries, just as it helps our country.
So we had tourism, we had defense, we had ag, and we had tech, and we had SME, and we closed with a member that actually brought a different view and a more active conversation around this entrepreneurship and how do you actually start a new business and get funding for it, and that was Robert Wolf. So Bob, if you can.
Well, I would just say it was a bit of the tale of two cities. Poland, it was a lot of strength they showed. They were very quick to say we're the sixth largest country on the tail of Spain in the EU, and that they're our friend, and actually we're opening a satellite office there, so it was also good from understanding them. I would say with Turkey, I would just say, Secretary, I commend you on incredible poise during some of the meetings. It was an interesting time there, and certainly TTIP and the Prime Minister being voted in that day, it was a lot going on, I will say. I think it was very interesting. I think the most telling thing is that all the things we talk about here that the U.S. wants, FDI, export, public-private partnerships, infrastructure, and all the other great things, is exactly what they both want. It could have been a mirror conversation to both sides of the island there, but they need us actually more than we need them, and mainly around the whole rule of law that the Secretary brought up. That seemed to be a real topic of conversation, especially Turkey, as Arnie said, within their own concerns. And so I think it was a great trip, and I think we went with a lot of pride being able to represent the President and the administration.
So I want to thank everyone who went and anyone who didn't go and is interested. Please read the report. As I said, it's easy to read. It's fairly comprehensive. I want to close with a thank you to Secretary Pritzker. Robert said it. In Poland, it was a little bit easier. In Turkey, she had to be poised, is a good word, and in control, and kind of keep us aligned. And it was an excellent. She just did a great job of leadership and confidence, making us feel good. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
For leading it.
That was a team effort.
Thank you, Ursula, and thanks for your leadership on the trip. There's no question that economic ties will be improved between those two countries because of this kind of elbow grease. I mean, just going there, getting on the ground and engaging. So just terrific job. And Secretary Pritzker, thanks for making it. Sure.
You know, I sincerely hope, Jim and Ursula, that we could actually do another trip, because it really, I think that our ability, as you've talked about, the challenges that we face in terms of market access in Turkey, your presence really helped us with that. And the Prime Minister opened up to the idea of really us laying out what the challenges are, and I think going together was an absolute, I keep saying it was a perfect example of commercial diplomacy, but I think it can help give leverage to us, so I hope we'll do it again.
Why don't we just say we're going to?
All right?
Why don't we just say we're going to? And we'll take it on, try to work with your staff.
Great, thank you.
Let's go someplace warm.
Yeah. Penny gets to choose the places.
No.
Listen, we're a little, I'm told the president is roughly on time, so we're a little backed up. I've got a little speech here on our midterm analysis. Why don't you assume I just made it? Okay? It's all about thinking what we can do better based on what we've done in the past. I think we all understand that kind of look. So why don't we, well, first, I think we have to vote and accept the letter of, the report from the trip. Are there, without objection, I suggest we accept the report that we've just heard a brief synopsis of. Okay, thank you very much. Without objection, the report is officially accepted. Well done. So the midterm reports, I think, why don't we start with Robert, who was just talking, Bob, about the recommendations on the Global Competitiveness Subcommittee.
Great.
Give us a quick.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll make it quick. I was asked to give a bit of a snapshot, so obviously we want to thank the administration, and we have to point out thanks to cabinet members Froman and Pritzker for trade and commercial diplomacy, and Chairman Hochberg, who's here on the Ex-Im Bank and the initiative, and Valerie with respect to our business outreach. Building on the President's remarks at the Business Roundtable last week, there are significant areas of opportunity for us to make progress in 2015, and we want to encourage those priority actions today. First, obviously, that's been mentioned many times, is TPA. It's the essential building block for a strong trade mandate partnership with Congress and the ability to finalize significant trade deals, including TPP and TTIP. And we heard some very positive comments this morning at breakfast from Ambassador Froman. We're also encouraged by the President's active engagement and look forward to working with the administration and the Hill to secure these objectives. The next is the administration's trade agenda is impressive. TPP and TTIP will cover more than half the world's GDPs and bring us closer to vital trading partners. We stand by what's already been said, the need for high standard and commercial and meaningful comprehensive access to these fast-growing markets. It is critical for us to enhance American exporters and investors as it creates tremendous opportunities for American companies, workers, and communities. The next important thing that our subcommittee report talks about is bilateral investment treaties. Building upon the progress made that Ambassador Froman will talk about with China and APEC, we encourage renewal progress on pursuing high-standard commitments in BITs, particularly a limited and targeted negative list for China. BITs provide certainty for American investors, and they set standards for greater market access. Africa, our next topic. Looking ahead to 2015, we look forward to working with the administration to build on the commitments this year at the Africa Summit, which was a fantastic outing, and we devote more time to a comprehensive approach to Africa. With AGOA up for renewal this year, we have an opportunity to look at AGOA 2.0, focusing on building capacity in mutually beneficial growth areas such as energy, infrastructure, and downstream manufacturing to promote development and American investment on the continent. I know that Deputy Secretary of Energy, Dr. Sherwood Randall, will actually be talking and making comments about Africa and trade. Lastly, as the private sector members of the PEC, we have a number of recommendations pending that we look forward to working closely with the administration and Congress to accomplish in 2015. Thank you, Chair.
Robert, thank you. I think one big concept to keep in mind here on these trade deals is, by and large, the theme is we've already reduced tariffs and quotas and non kind of regulatory barriers. The other guys haven't as much. So the theme is getting them to reduce. So it really is about the net impact is increased access, which has the kind of improvement potential for our economy, our workers, the middle class, and companies involved. So this is the most ambitious trade agenda that I have ever seen, and I'm glad you were very aggressive with your recommendations there.
Thank you.
And Ambassador Froman, who I was going to call on now, he stepped out for a minute, but we'll pick this all up when the presidents come.
Appreciate it.
Congressman Reichert, you've been tireless on this issue, and you've just joined us. Do you have a comment to make?
Thank you very much for allowing me to say a couple of words from the Hill. This is going to be a tough job, as I think everyone in this room hears. I get excited when I hear the reports. That's why I've been a part of this group for 6 years. I'm one of the charter members, and again, proud of that. I am the founder and the co-chair of the Friends of TPP, and also was the founder and co-chair of the Chorus Working Group, and I'm a member of the Trade Subcommittee on the Ways and Means Committee. So we have been intimately involved. You all recognize the importance of TPA. We're meeting with the leaders of the countries that are involved in the negotiations almost weekly, sometimes more than that. And they tell us the negotiations are going very well. However, they're interested, as all of us are, in getting TPA. We know that what TPA does is creates that partnership between the administration and Congress in creating that dynamic where countries around the world negotiating with us know what the parameters of the agreement are. They can negotiate in good faith. They can move forward knowing that Congress is supporting the president, and the president, the administration, is supporting Congress, and we are together on this. So it's critical for us in the political world to be a team, but we also need your help. And in hearing the talk today, Jim and Ursula, this is great news to see how engaged this group is in promoting TPA. It's critical that we pass TPA and move forward. I think it's necessary for us to get the best deal in TPP. And I have to say this last word, Mr. Chair. The ambassador and I just met here just a few days ago, had a great meeting, and a wonderful team, experienced team, dedicated team, who is open and ready to work on this and roll up their sleeves to get TPA passed. And we already are scheduling our next meeting with the ambassador and his team with the TPP Friends Caucus. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You know, the ground game is important here. We spent some time to give you guys some support in Congress, and I think we spent some time this morning at breakfast talking about some of the ways the business community is trying to get better organized this time to help. I won't go through it all now, but just in support of Robert's recommendations and some of the air cover I think you need, we're working it. Speaking of on the ground, Mayor County, any comments on this or XM, a related subject?
Well, let me just quickly say, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, and all the women and men that serve on this Export Council, we as mayors express our gratitude for being included in the conversation and look forward to working with you in the future. As you know, business is the foundation of what happens at the local level, local economies, and exports really are a prime example of the necessity for local government, business, our residents, and federal government and state government to all work together to build economies, to build business, because we are really existing in a global economy, and connecting our local businesses to that global economy is paramount of importance to local. Now, very briefly, I'll just say that our Conference of Mayors held our second summit on exports in October this year in Little Rock, and it was hosted by our Mayor, Mark Stodola. And our main focus was the movement of goods and certainly production of goods, but whether it be through ports or transportation around the United States. On the export front, the Conference of Mayors remains really supportive of all the trade deals that we have talked about and are going to talk about here today. And we are on record in support of the Trade Promotion Authority, and will be making our views known to the 114th Congress. We also strongly support the long-term reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank, and of course we're disappointed when it was extended only through July of 15, but we promise when the new Congress convenes, we'll be up to see you and hopefully be very supportive and be able
I'm on board already.
All right, thank you very much. Let's just hope we can get 435 to support us as well. But we promise that we're going to be part of the chorus, working with business groups and state and local governments weighing in to support the bank. In January, we're coming to D.C., and for our winter meeting, and we look forward to working with the Ambassador Froman and Chairman Hochberg, and we're asking them to come over to talk to our mayors about trade issues and certainly financing exports. I think the economy has turned around, but now's the time that we really have to sort of double down and concentrate on supporting all of our businesses, including the small and medium-sized ones. So, Mr. Chair, we are ready to, mayors across this country, we're ready to roll up our sleeves and be your partner and want to continue this conversation. Specifically in the city of Des Moines, we have initiated a regional export plan and have a committee. Mary Ann Dringa serves on that, and we thank her for her support and work with our local businesses to build our economies, and mayors around the country are doing the same. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I mean, your leadership is highly appreciated here. And if there is a way for us to engage with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as well as you individually, on as part of the ground effort to support Mike, we're going to come back to you on that. And I think there are a lot of, the closer you get to the action, ironically, the more people support stuff like this, but the voices are not, you've got to pull the voices up and have it heard in the halls of Congress here, and it's great to have you here.
If I can
Just sure.
add to Jim, I had the opportunity to go to the new members of Congress training session at the Kennedy School. There's some
Oh, yeah.
organization that does this, and it was, we spoke a wide range. It was myself and the CEO of American Express, Ken Chenault, and we spoke about everything from education to infrastructure to defense, everything. The biggest discussion was on trade, interestingly enough, on the Export-Import Bank, on trade, and all of the engagements around that subject. And I think that we have as much work to do with new members of Congress to educate them on the benefits of trade than we do with the public, as we do with the public. And so one of the things that we did offer them at that meeting, and I offered all of your services, literally locally, that they should connect with business leaders locally, reach out and actually ask questions and have a dialogue back and forth, because there's a large amount of misconception out there about the benefits of trade, as we all know, but it's also at the congressional level, and particularly new members. So,
Thank you, Ursula. Ambassador, my guess is we can defer, we can roll it in because we're pushing for time here a little bit. Yeah, my guess is you'll support everything that was in that recommendation. As its author, we hoped you would. The second element of our midterm report, manufacturing services, agricultural. Arnie, you want to take a swing at it?
Yeah, let me kick it off, and then I'll ask Andres Kluski and Pat Woods to jump in here too. Obviously, it's a lot of great progress is underway. I think the industries that are represented in this broad space are driving employment growth in the United States. Certainly in the travel area, we are well past peak employment with the jobs that have been created in the last few years. From a travel perspective, we really think about three things. One is communicating a welcome to the rest of the world. The second is about getting people permission to come to the United States. And the third is really about their arrival experience. Remember, it's a little bit upside down in some respects from the typical export. Most exports, we're sending things abroad and bringing money back. In this instance, our exports are actually bringing people here, having them leave their money here. So the welcome piece is really about Brand USA. Thanks really to great leadership, both from the administration, but Senator Klobuchar, Senator Blunt have been great allies in this. The reauthorization of Brand USA is now part of this omnibus bill, and hopefully will get passed, and that will put that organization in position for the next 5 years to continue to communicate the welcome to the rest of the world, to tell people we really want you to come. The second is about permission, and that's really about visas or visa waivers. Great progress has been made there. We were just thrilled to see the administration's steps on the 10-year visa for China, reciprocal visas for China, which will be huge in driving increased visitation from China. We continue to have conversations around the visa waiver program. Poland has been called out specifically in the Poland and Turkey trip report. Interestingly, visa waiver program is probably the best way of addressing security concerns because we get great information about the folks who are going through that process, arguably better information than we get through any other channel. Obviously, Ebola and some of the global issues have put a little political pause in this for a moment, but we think that we will get back to a place where we can continue to work on that. And then lastly is about arrival, and State Department and Homeland Security are continuing to work on the human side of that, making sure we have the resources in the airports. There's a big infrastructure piece, which is about airport condition and airport capacity. Everybody in this room are travelers. You know how our airports compare to the airports around the world. They are, by and large, pathetic. They need money. We need to add capacity to most of our airports so that we can allow people to come here. And obviously, we need to be creative about financing the infrastructure work that needs to get done, whether that be through user fees or through creative ideas around tax repatriation or other things. We've got to find a way to break the logjam and get airports and other infrastructure underway. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Andres for comments.
Okay, well, thank you. We think we have a unique opportunity to promote an integrated approach to infrastructure development. In 1980, infrastructure represented 4% of GDP. Right now, it's a little bit more than 1%, and this is less than most countries, including Germany, Brazil, China. And obviously, as was mentioned by Mayor Kane, that bottlenecks in infrastructure can affect the production and competitiveness of our products. Now, it's estimated that over the next 5 years, we need to double this level to have really first-class infrastructure. That would mean about $2 trillion. And that's where I think that the private sector can be a big help to address some of those bottlenecks. Right now, there's a historical, inexpensive private capital. It's available. And the United States is really the most attractive place to invest in the world. And that's because of the current health of the economy, the size of the economy, and the quality of our governance. And therefore, we would recommend that the administration establish a national infrastructure bank as one way to channel private capital to infrastructure projects. In addition, we could harness, the efficiency of the private sector to speed some of these projects. And one example, for example, is Canada, which has used private-public partnerships to drive the modernization of their air traffic control system in their airports. And that's something we think that could be looked at. And finally, there's an infrastructure spread along many different agencies, and there's an opportunity to have a coordinator of this to look at the different aspects, because you're only as efficient as the weakest part of your infrastructure. So obviously what counts is the final delivered price to the customer at the end, and by reducing production and transportation costs, this could very much help our exports. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. Pat, did you want to?
Yes, just for this committee, this subcommittee on manufacturing services and agriculture, just a few notes. Agriculture exports continue to be a large pillar of the exports, reaching $140 billion in 2013 fiscal year, and we'll expect larger even in the following year. As it relates to infrastructure, we think it's wise and timely that this subcommittee is focusing on it. You often hear me talk about waterways in addition to rail and roads, because waterways are extremely important to the exports of ag, ports, locks, dams, et cetera. One note is that we're also investing in the agriculture and tomorrow's infrastructure in general with a Midwest inland port. It's in Decatur, Illinois, which has 3 of the Class 1 railroads. It has 5 major highways, a wide-body aircraft airport, and we've built an intermodal container ramp with a capacity of 150 million ton. We expect to receive U.S. Customs and Border Patrol approval by the middle of next year. So we'll have an event to celebrate exports the latter part of the year, and we'll be inviting you or your participants or your designees to participate, and hope this will help the rural areas, as we've talked about, eliminate some of the bottlenecks that come from elsewhere with this large inland port.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks, Arnie. Thanks very much, Andre. Secretary Fox, do you have a comment?
Jim, thank you. Thank you, Ursula, as well, and everyone. Just a couple of very quick comments based on the infrastructure recommendations that both Andres and Patricia have mentioned, I just want to say we agree with those recommendations. Since the last time we met, just to give you a couple of updates on some good news that's happened in the infrastructure space. You may know that the administration has added 21 Open Skies partners since the president began his term of office. We now have a total of 115. But I wanted to let you know about our most recent efforts with Mexico, where we have developed an air services agreement. When the agreement takes force in 2016, it will open up many new aviation markets to one of our largest trading partners. And so that's a big development since the last time we got together. It's been mentioned already, but we're making tremendous underinvestments in our infrastructure pretty much across the board, whether it's roads, rail, ports, airports. And the impact of this, the cumulative effect of it is really starting to show its wear and tear around the country. Just a couple of notes here. Tennessee, the state of Tennessee is pulling back $400 million of projects because of federal funding uncertainty on the surface side. If you go to Rhode Island, they can show you charts at current funding levels, bridges. They have more good bridges than bad bridges today. In 15 years, they're going to have more bad bridges than good bridges because of the funding levels that we've set. And so I think it really is incumbent upon all of us to sort of row in the same direction on a couple of fronts. First of all, we need to have not only a sustainable, predictable source of revenue for transportation, but we need to have funding levels, as Andres said, that go far above where we are today. And I think that message needs to be reinforced across the board. Secondly, we do and have consistently supported establishing a national infrastructure bank, and we're exploring opportunities to bump up our ability to leverage private sector capital within our existing authorities. And in fact, in July, the President announced the Build America Partnership, which includes a number of efforts, including a Build America Transportation Investment Center that the DOT is standing up to look at precisely this issue. We put a call out to governors and state and local officials back in September, asking them about projects that they may want to convert to public-private partnerships. The response has actually been overwhelming, and I think there's going to be a steady stream of projects that we can work to try to integrate into public-private partnerships down the road. Anyhow, this is, I think, exciting developments, but the reality is we're slipping, and I don't think that message can be underscored more. I've traveled to more than 40 states, 100 communities, 150,000 miles, and I can tell you we're working to build the groundswell so that Congress will actually get rewarded for taking tough votes to solve this problem, but we do need the business community's engagement to get at this.
Thank you very much. I think that says it all. I think, we do want to engage, and I think, I know we're focused on trade right now, and it's vitally important, but as we get on to tax policy, I think there may be an opportunity on the infrastructure side. So I just want to let you know the business community supports that discussion. I think a year and a half ago, they didn't as much. I think you've now engaged us on that one, and we see it every day. I mean, Pat's comments, we see the infrastructure, and it gets down to competitiveness for U.S. industry. And so thanks for your leadership there. Appreciate it. Gene, Small Business Engagement Subcommittee.
Thank you. Good morning, all. As you know, our subcommittee has made, over the last couple of years, a dozen recommendations on different items, and we're pleased to note that there's been substantial action on most of those. But first, I have to acknowledge the people that helped us with that. Secretary Fox came out and spoke with the African American Chamber. Fred Hochberg has been to LA about 4 times. Former Secretary Hilda Solis came out, and so we just had tremendous support, especially from the staff, Gina, Tricia. They've really made this work for us, so we appreciate your help. But quickly to highlight some of our successes, the ITA has developed a 24/7 online one-stop shop. The SBA has strongly increased training of counselors at its small business development centers, and the SBA State Trade and Export Promotion Initiative has granted $68 million in matching funds awards to states over the past 4 years. The administrator, Ms. Sweet here, is in the process of now thinking about implementing a SBIR program to talk to other countries about this program, and also hosting a a global conference on, with other countries who wants to set up their own SBA. So we want to thank you for that effort. The Export Bank is teamed with Commerce, the SBA, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, and several lenders to make its Global Access for Small Business initiative a top priority to increase access to financing for SME exporters. The detail you will find in the report, so I know we're short on time, but at this time I would like to throw it over to Vanessa here to talk about financing.
Okay. Thank you, Gene. Yeah, I'd like to just make a few comments around early stage and entrepreneurial companies within the Small Business Committee. Just for reference, small business is really 500 people or less. So we really represent the early stage entrepreneur, which is 50 people or less. And first comment is to thank Secretary Pritzker and Jim and really all the CEOs in this room for continuing to understand the importance of entrepreneurship and innovation to ensure that we export the next great innovation globally. So thank you with that. And with that, with the access to capital being the most important piece for entrepreneurs in our community in order to export, we want to encourage the administration to continue to implement and extend new and existing programs to access to capital. There is a gap, I can tell you, on the ground for this sector in order to get loans or lines of credits from banks and community banks. The Treasury Department recognized this gap, and they developed a program, a highly successful program, called the Small Business State Initiative Credit, SSBCI. Sorry, the acronyms. I need to get used to that. This program within Treasury actually allocated funds to the states, who then the states allocated to venture capitalists in their states, who then allocated it to the local entrepreneur, who then could innovate and export. And we are passionate about this program because Columbia Green is actually a bifactor of this type of program. We took advantage of financing assistance by this program, which actually allowed us to export our products. And it's very important for the American entrepreneur. Just to give you an idea, with what we do, we implement maybe 1 acre green roof project in America. We're looking at implementing acres, like 17 acres in the Philippines. So getting access to capital in order for us to export globally for these large commercial projects is critical to the success of our company and many other American entrepreneurs. Therefore, I'd like to ask the administration to extend the Treasury program, SSBCI, which is in the recent budget request. With your emphasis on innovation within the American entrepreneurial industry, this type of program is a continued step forward in the great effort to support the American entrepreneur. I can't say this enough. I'm very honored to sit here with the most powerful and wonderful CEOs and companies of the last century. But I'm also just as honored to sit here and represent the local American entrepreneur to ensure that they get access to capital so that the next great American innovation gets export globally. Thank you.
Mary?
Thank you. I'll just add one other thing to the great report, and I do think that the SME group has made some really great strides in the last several years. One area, though, that we still would love to have a little bit more support on is the rules of origin, particularly for the small and medium-sized exporters. This is a very difficult task. Both the formulas and the rules for calculating U.S. content between the different FTAs is different. So it makes it very cumbersome. And as a medium-sized company, I have a full-time compliance officer. He's got a staff. But yet every FTA is different in how you calculate the content. So a machine we just had exporting to Mexico to help with solar installation fields. Some of the content was from Italy because the supply chain couldn't give us that data. We were not able to take advantage of the tariff reduction for that machine going into Mexico. So our customers end up paying more, or we take less margin, but it makes us less competitive. We've got an opportunity. So that would be one thing that I would hope we can continue to work with the administration on, is how do we get really a reduction in complexity and more consistency between the rules of origin in the future of trade agreements.
That concludes our report, and I have to skip out.
Okay, Gene, thank you very much. Madam Administrator, do you have a comment, or?
Well, I'm always happy to speak up for small businesses. Thank you. And first of all, so many of you supported us with
Thanks,
Ken
Jean.
Chanot. Thank you again, Jean. That was terrific. As we try to provide a lift to the small business community around Small Business Saturday. And so I really wanted to thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I saw you all shopping small, so thank you for that. But I wanted to thank Secretary Pritzker, you, and all of you around the table for what you're doing for our country and the leadership that you're providing in this regard. Thank you. Let me just say that from the Small Business Administration, we take these comments seriously, we take them back, and I hope that we can now begin to promulgate more forcefully the programs that we do have in place. For example, the 90% guarantee of our export working capital line that's now hit a record, and we've done more lending in that regard. Our UZACs, our export assistance centers, are busier than ever, and so we're pleased to see that that's taking hold. And what we're doing through our STEP program, and I was pleased to see that it's again in the budget, where we provide support to our states and our cities for assistance in getting people connected globally. And so we're pleased to see that that program also is becoming quite popular. Let me just say that I too enjoyed visiting with so many African countries who joined us in Morocco for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. And I have to tell you, after I delivered the closing address, other countries came and asked about how they can replicate the SBA programs. It's a wonderful suite of offerings. And I'm a banker, and I can tell you that the 7A product and the 504 are, the 7A is at zero subsidy, and the 504 is nearing zero subsidy. So the SBA is a really important tool that we can use not only domestically, but abroad to help other countries expand and grow their middle class at very little cost, which I think is an important story. And that's why the committee and I are exploring the ways in which we can invite other companies to learn about replicating the programs that we have here. And finally, just in the interest of time, I just want to thank Ambassador Froman for the incredible leadership that he's providing on all of the work around our trade programs. And I know that you all know that the SBA stands ready to partner with you, as we have been, to continue to promote these programs, because as we all succeed together, we know that you will grow and your supply chains will grow, and that's what we want to do. Closing, I see Jeff is still here. I just wanted to say that we've enjoyed working with many of you who have signed up for the supplier pay program, which helps pay our small businesses a little faster. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate it very much. Our fourth subcommittee report, David Apney, Trade Promotion and Advocacy.
Well, as a new member, I'd like to say I am honored to be a part of the President's Export Council, and I was named, I think, a week before the Poland-Turkey trip, so I got off to a running start, I can assure you. But the Trade Promotion and Advocacy Subcommittee over the last 2 years has identified several important initiatives to facilitate trade for U.S. companies. One recommendation was to create a single window portal for import and export data for U.S. trade and customs agencies to simplify paperwork, eliminate redundancy, and streamline processes. The administration has now set a deadline for December 31st, December 2016, for all 47 U.S. agencies to be on the single window platform. Our PAC subcommittee would like to also highlight some additional steps that should be taken to help promote U.S. exports. First, we'd like to encourage rapid implementation of the World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement, both here in the United States and around the world. There are significant differences among countries in custom processes and capabilities. The TFA will serve to close some of these gaps by having all countries first take steps to publish custom rules and procedures on the internet. Second, it issue advanced rulings on tariff classifications. Third, establish pre-arrival processing procedures. Fourth, allow the release of goods prior to final customs determination. And five is to adopt trusted trader programs. U.S. small and medium-sized enterprises that do not have the resources to navigate complex webs of custom and border procedures will be the biggest beneficiaries of these changes. We also heard that in the Poland and Turkey trip from those small and mid-sized enterprises. The U.S. therefore should take the lead in developing capacity building mechanisms to help countries close these customs gaps more quickly. The stronger our leadership effort in this area, the more U.S. exporters will benefit. The administration should also create a formalized structure for private sector input on implementation of the agreement to ensure that next steps taken achieve both the government and business goals. Lastly, we should examine what opportunities remain to optimize North America's competitiveness, given that 40% of all Mexican exports to the U.S. are U.S. origin content, while for Canada that number is 20%. Our three economies have become increasingly interdependent over the last 20 years. Simplifying North American trade will enhance our collective ability to compete globally. Therefore, we should leverage the U.S.-Mexico High-Level Regulatory Cooperation Council and draw lessons from the Beyond the Border effort between the United States and Canada. A focus on advancing trade facilitating measures within North America will position U.S. businesses for greater global opportunities. We applaud all the great work underway and stand ready to support the important next steps that I have outlined. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate it very much. Fred, somehow I think you might want to comment.
Just a word or two. Thank you. I want to really thank, obviously, the council and members of the administration, Penny, Jeff, others, Gene Hale, when I was out in Los Angeles. The importance of trade has been discussed at length, so I'm not going to add to that, but part of the trade picture is also having Ex-Im Bank financing to facilitate that. So it's clearly we're linked very closely with TPP and TTIP. We have 6 months and a few days left until we expire, so this is really not enough time for businesses to plan, for people to build factories, if we want to bring more foreign direct investment that Penny's been championing with Select USA, companies that open in the U.S. often want to export from the U.S. as well. So all of this the Export-Import Bank has a real role to play in that. The President has asked for and has been very strongly supportive of a 5-year reauthorization. We do face a bit of a battle or uphill challenge in Congress. And similar to, I'm sitting next to Maria, I mean, 90% of the customers we work with are small businesses, and over 40% of the actual value of the exports we export are from small businesses. In fact, Jim, we export more value from small businesses than we do airplanes and large companies. We have an annual report. This is a draft. I will get a final copy out to everybody in a couple of weeks, which outlines a number of these things and the talking points. Very briefly, I can see I'm going to move very fast. Yeah. Very, very fast. I think the Ex-Im Bank is very simple. It's like A, B, and C. Plan A is the private sector does a great job. We are Plan B. And frankly, if we're not there, there'll be Plan C, which is China. So we need to make sure that we have the competitive tool to rebut China when is what many of the companies in this room are facing when they're competing. They're not competing with companies, they're competing with countries.
It's critically important. In the interest of time, I will not say anything else, but the Secretary, I think, has a word.
Can I just,
Sure.
David, in response to your comments about both the North American competitiveness and the regulatory environment, we're working very closely through the HLED and through the Mexico High-Level Regulatory Cooperation Council, but we've not made the progress we need. I have spoken with Sean Donovan, the director of OMB, and he's got the administrator of OIRA very focused on seeing how we can really move the needle much further than we have over the past 12 months in both of these dialogues. So we're very focused on it, and we appreciate your continued feedback. Thanks.
Thank you. Time is short. Mary?
Yeah,
workforce readiness, how fast can you be? Raul wants you to be fast.
Okay, we have focused on STEM and transitioning veterans into the workforce. I think all around the room, we've got some great stories. More work needs to be done, but we really also want to focus, Senator Klobuchar mentioned it, on the high school preparation.
Yep.
So helping high school students, not only more graduation rates, which is going up, but also getting them into the trades and to the technical schools. And part of us we can do this in the private sector by making sure we're connecting with all of our levels of education and letting them understand what are the skills that are needed for young students. And then also really starting to work more and more on apprenticeship programs, which are proven programs to enable young people to be more ready for the jobs that are out there. And very last, I can tell you that every week I have customers coming in. They can be small, like a five-person contracting group, or thousands. Every one of them says, I would buy more of your machines, many of them are export machines, if I could find more skilled workforce.
You know, one of the things embedded in your report I'm aware of is veterans training.
Yes.
And this is something we at Boeing have a lot of experience with, having trained 4,000 veterans over the last couple of years. Unbelievably good workers, unbelievably motivated people, and deserving of our help. And I just wanted to comment, and I made you rush, or I know you would have hit on it, so I just wanted to underline that. I'm getting a variety of messaging on exactly when the president will be here, so why don't we, were there any other comments? Did you have anybody else, or you just buzzed? This was all you.
I think I was the only one, and I'm
Good.
filling in for Bill Height, who wasn't able to be here.
Thank you, Mary. Raul, why don't we turn to you and on Export Administration Subcommittee, and Raul has been a steady contributor over the years. Give us your midterm, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add my thanks to Secretary Pritzker for all the tremendous work her department has been doing with us. We held the PEXIA meeting yesterday, and you could see all the progress that's already being made in both terms of trade facilitation, but also on focusing our resources on the items that are most sensitive. And on the technology side, we've seen a significant number of license applications now transfer from the State Department to the Commerce Department. We hope that the Commerce Department continues to have the proper resources to maintain all this new work that they're getting. But that being said, I think Marilyn Houston has something she wanted to add.
Great.
I do, thank you. Great progress by this administration. I would agree on the export control reform list. It's a lot of good work going forward, and we continue to want to support you on that. I think an area of unfinished business that we've outlined in our committee is the area of the streamlining the actual decision-making process for what can be exported. So, for example, in the Department of Defense, where we have made progress by streamlining the number of subcommittees that have to go through the review process. That's good, but now we need to do more in terms of getting those decisions made more quickly. So I'd say there's three things that we would recommend. One would be that we get industry more involved in the process of understanding what that timeline is, how it's moving forward, how the cases are progressing. And then I think secondly, it's having a more specific determinate timeline so that we can understand. And the third is to have a database of previous cases where we don't have redundant reviews of something that's already been reviewed before. But I would say overall, we're all very excited about the work that we're doing on export control reform, because certainly it makes us much more competitive in the international marketplace. And from the standpoint of defense and security products, it helps the U.S. have stronger, deeper strategic relationships with our allies and friends around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raul and Marilyn. I mean, to your last point, it's really important. And this is not about loosening up standards. This is about getting competitive with what the rest of the world's been doing for years and years and years on things that most of us would agree don't deserve that level of scrutiny. So we have to vote. So I think my recommendation would be sort of en blanc here, all at once. We accept the recommendations of the subcommittees and we'll submit them to the president. We have all in favor? Aye. Okay. So adopted. Do we have a report on, we don't. Where's my top hat? You don't have it? My suggestion is that we just take a 3-minute break while promising not to leave the room, okay, sort of in place, because getting reassembled when the president arrives is very difficult. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry I rushed everybody. I know all the work and preparation have gone into the subcommittee reports deserved a little more time and hearing, so accept my apologies. Mike, did you want to lead off? Even before. Okay, everybody? Okay.
That was fast.
We've just found a way to maximize the process here. Ambassador Froman was going to lead off in any case with a discussion on trade, which was going to lead into some of the president's remarks. So why don't we use the fact that we have Mike here, take your time. You'll likely get interrupted by your boss, but you know how to handle that. So why don't you dive into it and we'll flow through.
Well,
Thank you, Mike.
I recognize I'm likely to be interrupted, so I'll try and focus on the highest priority issues, and then if there's more time. Let me just say it's been a very productive month or two on the trade policy front, and it's reflected in a number of your report's recommendations. While the president was traveling in Asia last month, we were able to make a major breakthrough with India on the trade facilitation agreement, which had run into a deadlock, and that has now been adopted by the WTO membership as a whole. And as soon as 2/3 of the countries ratify, and each one has their own process for doing so, we're already well on our way towards doing that. It doesn't require congressional approval. The agreement will go into effect, and that is a major step forward, the first multilateral agreement in the WTO's history. While we're there as well, we made a major breakthrough, the president made a major breakthrough with China on the information technology agreement. And that's an agreement that covers $1 trillion of trade, will eliminate tariffs on $1 trillion of trade. An important breakthrough for the U.S. and China to come together, but now we have to get the support of the other ITA partners. That's proving to be a bit of a challenge, and I'm sorry for stepping out before, but that was to take a call from Geneva on that issue as we're trying to mediate between China and a couple of the other ITA members to see if we can reach closure on that. The president was in Australia at the G20 that Caroline prepared for. There was the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership discussion with the European leaders, and there was good momentum behind all of the European leaders, including the new president of the Commission, about having a fresh start in those negotiations and using this window of 2015 to move us forward as quickly as possible to make progress there. And we've since had meetings with our new European Union counterparts, and I think we're well on our way towards getting those negotiations on a good track. And then finally, in Beijing, the president convened all of the TPP leaders who were all there for the APEC meeting and had a very good discussion of reviewing the state of the negotiations, the outstanding issues, recommitting to providing the political support necessary to get this done and get this done relatively quickly, an agreement on a robust work program, and literally as we speak across the street, the negotiators from the 12 countries are there and working through outstanding issues. So we feel very good about all of that. That does come back to domestically the Trade Promotion Authority that Congressman Reichert and others mentioned, where we are continuing to work with Democrats and Republicans in both houses to try and move forward with a product that can get broad bipartisan support. And we look forward to working with the new Congress with that as well. There'll be other issues that come before Congress next year that we're also hoping to get done. The renewal of AGOA, our African Growth and Opportunity Act program, the renewal of GSP, the Generalized Systems of Preferences, which has been lapsed for a year and a half, and the renewal of Trade Adjustment Authority, very importantly, so that as workers are affected, that they have ability to get retrained and redeployed into the market. Final thing I would say is about enforcement. The trade agenda only works because not only do we negotiate these agreements and negotiate these rights, but we fully enforce our rights as well. And we have a very robust enforcement agenda. We've set up an interagency trade enforcement center with the help of particularly of Commerce, but also of other agencies that are helping to put together these more complex and more challenging and more systemic cases. We've been working very closely with the Department of Labor on our first ever labor case having to do with Guatemala, and it's very important that we continue to resource that and move forward with those cases to demonstrate that we take that we're going to hold our trading partners to their obligations in a serious way. Finally, I would just say, at the same time, we've got negotiations going on in services in Geneva on environmental goods. We have a bilateral investment treaty negotiation that has made quite good progress over the course of the year with China, but many difficult issues remain heading into next year. And we're looking forward to continuing that discussion in Chicago next week with Secretary Pritzker and the JCCT. And then I'll just mention India, where we reconvened the Trade Policy Forum a couple of weeks ago, the first time we've had that in 4 years with India, with the new Modi government, to try and get that relationship back on track as well. As we look at TPA and TPP and the other work that we're doing with Congress, I just want to note that we've got a whole of government effort underway here. You heard from several of our colleagues around the table, and coordinated by Jeff with leadership from Valerie and from Caroline here at the White House. We've got virtually every agency around this table actively involved in promoting the trade agenda, speaking, talking to members of Congress, coming up with stories from their constituency groups of how trade affects them, and we're going to need all of that to achieve what we need to achieve with Congress over the coming years. So I just want to thank them and thank Jeff and Valerie and Caroline for all the work that's being done out of the White House to make this happen. And we have a cabinet trade, what we call the trade cabinet, later today as part of a regular effort to coordinate that efforts. I just wanted to thank the mayor for his comments. As Jim said, the closer you get to the ground, the more people appreciate the impact of trade in a positive way on the economy, and we have been reaching out to mayors and governors and state legislators, and very much looking forward to working with them to make sure that people in the communities and their representatives have a keen understanding of how opening markets, leveling the playing field by raising standards around the world, and making sure that we're showing American leadership in setting the rules of the road for the international system, as opposed to ceding that ground to other countries, how important that is to creating good and well-paying jobs on the ground at home.
Mike, maybe just while we do have another couple of minutes, the bit with China and the opening in India with Modi, could you elaborate a little on those two? I think it might be of great interest to the group.
Well, in China, President Xi has certainly made the decision that a bilateral investment treaty with the United States could help support reform efforts at home. And because the bilateral investment treaty is based on what we call a negative list, meaning that anybody can do anything in China unless it's explicitly and specifically regulated or prohibited, as opposed to needing approvals to get everything done at multiple levels. That's going to require a very significant change in the way the Chinese have done business to date. They've indicated they'd like to do that, and that's been the basis on which we've sat down to negotiate. But obviously, the proof of the pudding will be in how long that negative list is. And is it a short list or is it a very long list? And that'll be part of our discussion next year. But this year, we've actually had quite good and constructive discussions about our model BIT and the basic principles of a BIT. And the Chinese have engaged quite actively, and we're making quite good progress on that. We'll have to deal with some issues that are specific to China. We'll have to deal with their negative list issue, but it has certainly gotten a lot of high-level attention inside China, and that has been clear from all of our conversations with all of their various ministries. And we are hopeful that we will continue to be able to make progress on that, and that will help drive reform efforts in China as well. On India, as you know, we had a new government in India over the summer. Prime Minister Modi came here in September and had very productive meetings with the president. And we have all been engaged, and Secretary Pritzker and Secretary Kerry there were in late July. We've all been engaged with our counterparts over the course of the last several months. There certainly is a lot of energy and enthusiasm about the potential of what this new government means for opening up the economy, attracting investment, promoting stronger trade and economic relations with the United States. Obviously, again, there's a lot of work to be done, both through their parliaments, through their regulation, cutting through their bureaucracy, and that's where we need to get into the details with them and make progress. But while we were there, we had good discussions on manufacturing policy and how it's better to be part of a global supply chain than to build up a wall and do import substitution and build uncompetitive businesses in India. We had talks about intellectual property rights and the importance of intellectual property rights to creating an innovation environment that can attract the kind of investment that they're looking for over time. We talked about services and agriculture and opening up those markets. And I think we will all be engaged on the whole cabinet. I know Secretary Liu will be going there soon as well. We'll all be engaged in our efforts to try and strengthen what could be, as the president say, the defining partnership of the 21st century.
The only comment I'd make on the trade agenda, which I think the administration is being very smart in getting after quickly in the new year. I think because there is a convergence of things. There's a ideological convergence between the two parties, quite honestly, on most of it. You're getting these things done. I mean, we in the business community are used to these things dragging on for years, but when you listen to the details of what's going on, he's closer to the end than the beginning of these things, and these are the most complex things you can imagine. And I think there is motivated partners on the other side. I think the U.S. economy is growing, is strengthening, and so there's some self-interestedness in the Europeans and some places in Asia, notwithstanding, and a currency situation that helps them a little bit. So there's a little bit of, and this is just me talking, not you, Mike. Those dynamics, when added all up, if we can get so now's the time for the ground game. Now's the time for the ground game, because for those of us that have been around a long time, there's been many calls to arms on trade, and it often isn't the right time or seems like the right. This really is the right time, and so thanks for your leadership.
Look, I think that's right, and there's been, certainly our sense is that there's a thirst in the country for bipartisanship, for getting things done. This is one area where Republican leadership has indicated that they would like to work with the president and the administration to get something done. It's important to have it be done on a bipartisan basis, and so we'll be working with Democrats as well as Republicans to make sure that the products can attract the support on a bipartisan. But we do believe we have an interesting and a good window of opportunity over the course of the next year to get these things done and considered.
And I mentioned earlier today the BRT initiative, which is really about our supply chains. It's really about the 15,000 small businesses that support Boeing, not about Boeing, okay? And that's why we're making the investment to engage at the community level, and that's why I really want to get tied in with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, because I think there's a number of hot spots around the country where we can make some noise. Yes, Caroline.
I was just going to add that foot stomp your point that Mike is doing an amazing job, and also that we are getting near to the end game, and this is the time for the ground game. But also to pick up on your point about the interest around the world in these trade agreements. And you're right that part of it comes from our increasingly obvious economic strength, which is certainly something that I hear and can see in people's eyes when I go around to other countries, and I see Penny nodding. But it's also about the geostrategic nature of these agreements. It's clear in Asia that there are other ways of doing business than ours, and it's really important that many of our allies and partners find that deepening our trade and investment relationship is an important part of moving closer to us. You spoke this morning about Poland and how the close political ties are a basis for an economic and business and commercial relationship, and I think that is really true with the TPP partners and also with the EU in Europe. So I think that's an important element that's worth drawing out for all of you as well.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. Any other comment? Jeff, do you have any comments? I know you're working this hard.
No, I think it's been covered, and as Mike said, we are all in, and you'll hear that from the president. And if you look back and see how trade's been done in the past, it's an all-in effort across government, across business, across all constituencies.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Any word on timing? Okay.
Might be time for that 2-minute break.
That 2-minute break. Please stay in the room. Please stay in the room.
Pretty much on time.
Yeah, good. Good to have you here. Yeah, good to have you here, Mr. President. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah. Hey, good. How have you been? Yeah. You got enough room?
Slide this just.
Yeah, give me.
See you again. Hey, bro.
How you doing? Good. I like that. Hey, it's good to see you, Mr. President. How you doing? So nice to see you. How are you? Thank you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Hello. How are you? Good to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. How are you?
Can I dive in, or you wanna, you don't need
Yeah,
to?
you just jump in. Just
All righty.
do your thing.
I'm so sorry I'm late, people. Usually I've been on, I'm a pretty timely guy. But it seems like there's quite a few things on my agenda today. But I think we're going to bring in the pool, and I'm just going to make some quick remarks at the top, and then everybody can fill me in on the great work that the council's been doing. Tell me when you're ready, everybody.
Well said.
All good? Well, good morning, everybody. I just want to offer a few thoughts before you return to the meeting. Obviously, we've seen some significant economic progress here in the United States over the last year. Our businesses have added almost 11 million jobs over the past 57 months. This year, our economy has already created more jobs in any year since the 1990s, with still a month to go. All told, since 2010, we've created more jobs here in the United States than Japan, Europe, and all advanced nations combined. And one of the reasons that we've been able to create so many jobs here in the United States is because our exports have been strong. Last year, our businesses sold a record $2.3 trillion of made-in-America goods and services. And these exports support more than 11 million American jobs. Typically, by the way, jobs that pay higher wages. And so this council is designed to build on this progress. It is in part a factor in the progress that we've made. We've had some terrific suggestions from some of our leading businesses, but also some small businesses and medium-sized businesses who are starting to sell overseas. The recommendations that have been generated by the council have then been implemented by our various agencies, and we're here not to rest on our laurels, but rather to continue to make a big push to sell even more overseas. I've said before, I will go anywhere around the world to go to bat for American companies and American workers. We're going to keep on pushing trade agreements that benefit American companies and American workers and ensure that we've got a fair and even playing field, particularly in the fastest growing markets. We're going to work with Congress to try to renew Trade Promotion Authority and secure approval for a very ambitious Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which would create a higher standard for trade in the fastest growing, most populous, and dynamic region of the world, the Asia-Pacific region. We're also announcing because manufacturing has been a real bright spot in our growing economy, some additional measures to boost manufacturing here in the United States so we can sell more manufacturing goods overseas. We're announcing today more than $290 million in new investments to launch 2 additional high-tech manufacturing hubs. One's going to be focusing on flexible computer chips that can be woven into everything from the gears in a helicopter to the fabric in your shirt. Another is going to focus on advanced sensors that can dramatically cut energy costs for our factories. So far, we have launched 8 of these hubs, and we intend to get 16 done. So we're more than half of the way there, and they're helping us to compete for the next generation of manufacturing. One of the reasons that manufacturing has been growing faster here than the overall economy is because of real savings on the energy front, outstanding workers, but also because our companies have retooled and once again made that investment in innovation that has been the hallmark of American manufacturing for years. I also want to thank many of the folks around this room who've been working with us to find ways that we can increase and improve the pipeline for skilled workers going into the companies that ultimately end up exporting goods and services overseas. To make sure that our workers have those skills, today my Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, is announcing a $100 million competition to help expand apprenticeship programs across our country. Many of the companies around this table have helped design it or are already participating in these apprenticeship programs. They give talented, motivated young people the chance to get an outstanding career. They get a pathway, a door open to them that allows them to succeed and secure a position in the middle class. And it helps us recruit the kind of workers that are going to keep us competitive for years to come. Finally, we've got real opportunities to make some bipartisan progress this year on some areas that will make us more competitive in this global marketplace. For example, today our companies face the highest corporate tax rate in the world on paper. There's so many loopholes that some end up paying a much lower rate, some pay the full freight. It distorts our allocation of capital. It makes us less competitive relative to businesses that are headquartered overseas. We need to fix that. And I think that there's genuine interest on both the Democratic and Republican side in making that happen. And so I just want to thank everybody on the Export Council for the outstanding work that you've already done. I'm looking forward to hearing about the recommendations that you have generated during the course of this meeting. And rest assured that I will be your partner for the remainder of my time in this office, making sure that we have the strongest, most competitive companies, the best workers, the best research and development, and the highest exports that we've ever seen in our history. All right? Thank you very much. Thanks, Poole.
Agree with John
Thank you,
Brennan
Paul.
that the CIA's interrogation program saved lives.
Thank you. We're going to exit out. We're talking about exports, John. Thank you.
Listen, thank you very much, Mr. President. You know, if you look historically at the PEC, there has never been a time in its history where the administration, you personally, and the people on your cabinet have supported this group to a greater extent. And we feel that engagement and your presence here today, once again, makes that point. It energizes us, and I think it moves the agenda along. What we did today, we focused heavily on trade with Ambassador Froman. I'd like to maybe come back and get your perspective on how we're going to move that forward. Everybody in the room is leaning forward in every kind of way to get that done. I think we reported out on the basis of 6 of our subcommittees recommendations we're going to send to you, which you will get in due course. I think the other thing we talked about was a fact-finding trip we made to Turkey and Poland, which I think gave everybody in this group an on-the-ground understanding of the leadership, the impact of leadership of Penny and Mike and others on furthering things along. But I think if there were two things I would just sort of tee up, and I know we have limited time with you. One would be getting these things done. We all think it's the right time, and you've suggested that to us at the BRT and some other places. Any comments you'd have for us to help you get it done? And then the other thing that came up is China. You spent a lot of time with President Xi personally connecting. Penny's going to take the leadership role, starting in Chicago next week, JCCT. We're trying to engage, but any comments on China would be those are sort of the themes that came out of the group this morning.
Well, if you heard from Mike Froman, then you heard from
the Oracle,
the guy who's in the trenches on these trade negotiations. I'll just give you a couple of quick top lines. First of all, I'm much more optimistic about us being able to close out an agreement with our TPP partners than I was last year. Doesn't mean that it's a done deal, but I think the odds of us being able to get a strong agreement are significantly higher than 50-50, whereas last year I think it was still sort of up for grabs. The question then becomes, assuming we are able to get the kind of agreement that is good for American workers and good for American businesses, how do we proceed in Congress? I think that despite the fact that we had an election I did not, I wasn't that happy with, the dynamics really don't change in terms of the number of votes in the House and the Senate that are there to be gotten for a good trade deal. But we have to make the case. And I think we can make a very strong case that what we're doing here is really setting a higher bar that will give us more access to markets, will give us greater IP protection, will make sure that U.S. companies, both in goods and in services, are less disadvantaged by non-tariff barriers and state support and procurement practices in these countries than they've been in the past. The pushback that we're going to get domestically derives from a couple of sources. One is from not just labor, not just organized labor, but a public perception generally that trade has resulted in an erosion of our manufacturing base as companies moved overseas in search of lower wage labor. And my essential response to those arguments is not to deny that there have been some consequences to China's ascension to the WTO and offshoring, but rather that horse is out of the barn. We are now in the worst of all worlds where they have access to our markets. Much of that shift in search of low-wage labor has already occurred, and yet we don't have the access to those markets that are growing and no levers to force these other countries to increase their labor standards and their environmental standards. So that instead of fighting the last war, what we need to be doing is looking forward, and there's no doubt that what Mike is negotiating creates higher labor standards and greater access than the status quo, and that's what we should be measuring against. I'll give you just one very specific example, and that's Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam's probably the most interesting country involved in these negotiations. It's still a one-party system that provides workers very few rights, if any. And yet, in order to be part of TPP, they're having to make some pretty radical shifts in how they treat workers. Now, they're not going to suddenly have the same labor standards as Germany does, but there's going to be an improvement. And by us establishing a baseline for labor rights, even in a country that has traditionally had no labor rights, we're improving our position, not deteriorating our position. The same is true for the other set of critics that we may receive, and that is from the environmental community, although there's divisions between the large environmental groups. As I said at the BRT, I don't know exactly what Malaysia's environmental rules are, but I guarantee you they're lower than ours. And for us to be able to include in a TPP agreement basic environmental standards is a win for us. It puts us not at a disadvantage, it puts us at more of an advantage. The final criticism, not the final, but another criticism that we're going to receive domestically is this issue of, what's the term of art in terms of lawsuits? IS. Right. We've looked at the facts, and generally speaking, I think the language that's being used allows every country to maintain its public health and safety and welfare provisions. Really what we're trying to get at here is making sure that foreign companies are not treated differently than domestic companies. That's the primary concern, is a discriminatory application of rules in ways that are arbitrary. I think that that's something that all of us should agree on. The big bugaboo that's lifted up there is tobacco companies suing, poorer countries to make sure that anti-smoking legislation is banned, or at least tying them up with so much litigation that ultimately smaller countries cave. Those are issues that I think can be negotiated. There are some areas of particular sensitivity or concern, but overall the principle that we should make sure that U.S. companies, when they invest or export to other countries, are abiding with their safety rules, but that those public health and safety rules are not being discriminatory applied or a ruse in order to keep us out. That should be something everybody's in favor of. So in terms of timing, how TPP happens versus TPA, I think regardless of the sequence, we're going to have to make the sale. And it's going to be very important for business to be out there and champion this and show that this is ultimately good for you, for your suppliers, for your workers. If you look at all the major exporters, you take a Boeing, presumably in every congressional district, you got to find a bunch of suppliers who are, making the case, and their workers are making the case. So it's not just a bunch of CEOs calling, but it's people who understand that they've got a stake in it. So I think that's on the labor front. On China, all of what we're doing with TPP has a direct application to China. China's actually not that complicated. They will take whatever they can get. They will exploit every advantage that they have until they meet some resistance. But they have a great interest in the relationship with the United States and recognize the interdependence that is evolved between our two economies. And so the key with China, I think, is to continue to simply press them on those areas where trade is imbalanced, whether it's on their currency practices, whether it's on IP protection, whether it's on their state-owned enterprises. The business investment treaty that they have shown an interest in negotiating could end up being a significant piece of business. We actually saw some movement during my last trip on issues surrounding technology, and I think that it's indicative of their interest in trying to get this right. And by the way, if we get there's been some suggestion that by doing TPP, we're trying to contain or disadvantage China. We're actually not. What we are trying to do is make sure that rather than a race to the bottom in the region, there's a reasonable bar within which we can operate. And we hope that then China actually joins us in not necessarily formally being a member of TPP, but in adopting some of the best practices that ensure fairness in operations. So, and the climate change announcement that we made was very significant. For those of you who are impacted by the power plant rule that the EPA is initiating here, it's good to know that one of the arguments that's always been made about us dealing with climate change or environmental issues generally here in the United States is, well, it puts us at a disadvantage with China. Well, we're trying to take away that excuse by making sure that China is also abiding by higher standards and in a verifiable way. So we're going to be focused on that.
Do you have time for one more question?
One more question.
I think one of the things we talked about this morning with Vice President Biden was Russia sanctions. And I think by and large the business community, while there's some debate about exactly to what degree this, that, or the other thing, that these have been implemented very successfully and very methodically, worked well with the business community to maximize impact while minimizing impact to us. And so there was a pretty robust discussion that I think many of us in the room ended up saying, hey, whether we're in the third inning or the eighth inning, just keep moving. And then there's a lot of support in the business community for what you're doing, keeping Europe lined up, which is our biggest concern. Merkel seems to be hanging in there. And anyway, the Vice President gave us a very robust discussion. Any views from you? I know you've talked to a lot of your peers on the subject.
You know, Joe's been very close to this, so he probably gave you a pretty sound overview. I think you identified what's been important in this process, and that is our ability to keep Europe in lockstep with us. There's maybe some movement out of Congress for us to get out ahead of Europe further. We have argued that that would be counterproductive. And we may need some help from the business community in making that argument to the soon-to-be chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and others. Putin does not have good cards, and he actually has not played them as well as sometimes the Western press seems to give him credit for. There's been an improvisational quality to this whole process because the situation in Ukraine actually took Russia by surprise. And it's working for him politically, domestically, but profoundly damaging in terms of their economy long-term, not just short-term. Where Putin will succeed is if it creates a rift in the transatlantic relationship. If you start seeing Europe divided from the United States, that would be a strategic victory. And I'm intent on preventing that. And the way to prevent it is making sure that we are taking into account the very real economic impact on Europe from these sanctions, being measured in terms of how we apply them, and having some strategic patience. The notion that we can simply ratchet up sanctions further and further and further, and then ultimately Putin changes his mind, I think is a miscalculation. What will ultimately lead to Russia making a strategic decision is if they recognize that Europe is standing with us and will be in it for the long haul, and we are in fact patient. And if they see that there aren't any cracks in the coalition, then over time, you could see them saying that the costs to their economy outweigh whatever strategic benefits that they get. So you got, I'm sure, everything about Ukraine soup to nuts from Joe. I'll just emphasize as a takeaway for the business community that we have been successful with sanctions precisely because we've been systematic about it and made sure there wasn't a lot of daylight between us and the Europeans. That should continue, and even though sometimes it's tempting for us to say we can go further, it won't do us any good if it means suddenly Europe peels off and then are backfilling various things that U.S. companies are obliged to abide by. All right?
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great work you're doing. Keep it up.
Yeah, okay.
All right.